Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Game Develop Repeat. I am your host, Chris, a music educator turned indie game developer, and in today's episode, we're talking about choosing a game engine, choosing the engine you're going to make your games with. This is a topic which gets over-analyzed and I think probably beaten to death. And I'm not going to talk about it so much from the technical perspective. I will give a brief overview of a few engines as far as I see them, right? Like from my fairly novice perspective, I'm a fairly new game developer. I've released one game, right? I'm going to look at it from that perspective a bit and say, oh, here's a brief overview of kind of what I'm seeing from each of these engines. But most of what we're going to talk about is the process of choosing a game engine and the stumbling blocks that I've run into in this transition from one engine to another, and how I'm going about this process, and hopefully talking through that a bit will be useful to you. And maybe you'll be able to notice some stumbling blocks that you run into, maybe not even in choosing a game engine, but in any of these situations where you're getting paralyzed by analyzing the situation so much, right? And I think the big takeaway, if there's any one point to take away from this, I'm going to spoil it right now in the intro. Don't just do research, do testing. That's the takeaway from this entire episode. Test things. Don't just research them. Having said that, we're going to now dive a bit deeper. It's really easy for me to get pulled into a rabbit hole of reading other people's opinions on engines and reading what pitfalls they've run into and looking into the details of what the engine can do and going, is this the right one? How's the workflow later on? How's the audio workflow? Is this good for user interface? How does this work with consoles? How does this work with this, that, and the other? It's very easy to get sucked into that because I think, oh, I'm preparing myself for the future. I'm getting ready for future problems. I'm sharpening the axe, so to speak. I'm making sure that we're good to go. But I'm not sharpening the axe. I'm picking the axe before I even start sharpening, right? Like I'm not honing my skills. I'm taking forever to pick which skills to hone. That's a key difference, and I think it's important to acknowledge that. There's an allure to researching indefinitely. There's an allure to making sure that you pick the perfect tool. It feels like you're getting better at something on some weird level, or it feels like you're shortening the process. It feels like you're making sure that everything's going to go very smoothly. Everything's not going to go very smoothly no matter what you do. That's just true. It's kind of how it goes. You're going to run into difficulties. That's just the way of any difficult skill. And that's fine. It's part of the process. It's part of the enjoyment. You get to work through these puzzles. You get to tackle challenging things, and you get to learn more in the process. Excuse me for one moment. Sorry about that. I still have a bit of a cough. As I was saying, you get to tackle these difficult things. And there's going to be struggle no matter which engine you pick, and that's fine. It's part of it. That's okay. Now, do you want to pick an engine that's going to be a nightmare for you because it can't do 3D and you are trying to make a 3D game? Well, no. You want to make sure that you're picking an axe for chopping down a tree and not like, I don't know, a sword. You want to make sure that you're using the right tool for the job, but only to the extent that it's the right type of tool, right? You don't need to make sure that you have... I mean, okay, how am I going to make this analogy? Grab a bunch of axes and try chopping trees with them and see which one feels right in your hands, right? Don't just look at all of them and think, oh, that might feel right in my hands. Oh, do you think that will feel right in my hands? No, just go over there, grab some axes, chop some trees, see what happens, right? Not literally. Please don't have a tree fall on you. That would not be good. So don't do that. But try some engines. There's no real risk to it. The only risk is that you put in some hard work, learn some skills in the process, and then you don't really get to use those skills in that engine anymore. But on some level, you've trained some fundamental skill anyway. So whatever, try some different engines. Don't spend forever on them, right? Give them a week, maybe a month. Give them some time. Give them however much time you need to really decide whether or not they're the right fit for you, and do some fundamental research to say, like, hey, can this do 2D? Can this do 3D? Has anybody successfully made a game in this engine that's like sort of similar to what I'm trying to make? That's a good thing to look at, right? You can just go, well, is it possible? And then if you go, oh, it is. Okay, cool. I'll try it then. It seems to be possible. This person did it. Great. This engine is safe to use because it is possible to make the thing. I think that's a good thing to remind ourselves of. It's like we think that the engine is going to stop us from making things or somehow be some huge detriment, when really it's like a gigantic, useful tool, and sometimes there are going to be frustrations, and that's okay. But I think I like being paralyzed sometimes. I think I like having this analysis paralysis. I feel like I'm finding the magic pill. Like I feel like I'm like, ooh, just 3 more links I have to read, and then I'll know for sure what's the perfect engine. And then whenever I succeed, I'm like, oh, good thing I picked the perfect engine, right? No, I don't think that's it. I think what really happens is like you waste 2 months, right, clicking on a bunch of links when you should just test it and go, do I like this one? Does this fit my hands? Like, does this axe fit my hands? Does this engine work with the way that my brain works? Like, am I able to work with this engine or not? Maybe it's a bad fit. So that's my biggest stance, is just give it a test run, man. Give it a test run. If you've been sitting here for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 2 months, and you've been going, oh, should I use Unity or Unreal? I don't know. Should I use Godot or should I use Unity? Or should I try Gamemaker? What should I do? Just give something a try. Just give it a try. Give it a week. See what happens. And if you hate it, try something else. If you don't hate it, maybe schedule out, I'm going to spend a week on each of these. At the end, I'm going to pick. And if you still can't pick, maybe roll a die or something, right? Like, it's not so consequential of a decision as long as it has all the basic features that you need. What is more important is that you get started making cool stuff. Now, we are going to talk a little bit about some individual engines, not so much to analyze them and go super deep, but just to give you like a basic, oh, this engine has this feature, this engine has this, or this is generally used for this, right? And give you a little jumping off point to say, you know what, that sounds cool. I'll try that one, right? And I want to talk about my experience with these engines because I've been exploring a little bit. All right, let's talk about the engines themselves. I'm going to talk a little bit about my experiences with them, some games that have been released on each engine to give you an idea of what they are capable of. I'm not going to talk about their pricing plans, and I'm not going to get super technical. The only pricing thing I will mention is that Godot is free and open source software. That's valuable to know, so we'll throw it out there right at the beginning. I will mention a caveat with that, which is if you're doing a console release, it's not going to be free to release on consoles. Godot itself is free, but you're going to end up probably paying some money to do a console release with Godot. All of that out of the way, let's talk about these engines one at a time. First things first, let's talk Unity. Unity is a great engine. I like it. It does 2D, it does 3D. Here's a bunch of games that used Unity. This is information coming from SteamDB. You can sort by engine and kind of look through what has been released, what has used this engine in its creation. Wow, I had a lot of trouble with that sentence. All right, so some examples are City Skylines, The Forest, Subnautica, Raft, Unturned. I haven't played that. Human Fall Flat, Plasmophobia, Valheim is on here. I didn't know that. Cuphead, Risk of Rain 2, GTFO, Kerbal Space Program, Besiege. It's a very popular engine, and it's used in both indie and in AAA to some extent, right? It's used for some bigger studios, not just tiny indie projects, not just tiny one-man projects. It is a pretty major engine. Now, I'm not using them anymore. I liked them. I enjoyed using the engine, and I'm done with it. Wait, did I mention Hollow Knight? Hollow Knight also. I like the engine. I no longer trust the company behind it, and for that reason, I'm out. That's just how I operate on some things. Like, I'm not going to keep investing a lot of time and energy if I can't trust the people behind it anymore. They're no longer a business partner that I am personally willing to work with because of my own specific boundaries that I draw around that sort of thing. So I like the engine. I can still recommend it as an engine to learn things from. There's a lot of community resources out there. I thought the experience of learning it was pretty straightforward and pretty comfortable. I wouldn't be surprised if in the past I've recommended it on the podcast in older episodes. It's a good engine. There are reasons to use it still. For me, it's no longer the engine for me. What about Unreal? Unreal is another major engine. This is the other huge engine, and it is capable of some crazy visual stuff, right? Like, it can look really cool. Even just in trying it out, I was like, wow, this is beautiful. This is incredible. There's so much cool stuff with the lighting. I love it. And I was like, I'm really excited to use this. I don't even have 3D game ideas, but this makes me want to have 3D game ideas. It is mostly oriented towards 3D, but can do 2D as well. And I really want to explore the 2D capabilities of this engine, but I don't know if I can at this point. My understanding is that if you're doing a 3D game and you want it to look super, super beautiful, this is kind of the direction to go, especially now that Unreal 5 is out. Here are some games that use Unreal. Sid Meier's Civilization 6, Deep Rock Galactic, Rocket League, Hogwarts Legacy, Astroneer, Grounded, Paladins, Life is Strange, The Day Before. Oh man, sorry, that game, for those listening in the future, that game just had a disaster of a release, and it tickles me to see it near the top of this list. Okay, so that's a general idea of Unreal Engine. I enjoyed checking it out. I thought it looked very clean. I really like the feel of it. It seems a bit heavier. It's definitely a bigger engine to download, but I actually like the workflow, and I wish that there was an easier jumping off point for 2D with Unreal, because there's a lot that I like about it, but I just don't know that it's worth it when I can develop so much quicker and with so much more support in other tools that have more 2D support. Now, the next one we're going to talk about is actually Gamemaker, and the reason it's next is because I'm doing this in order of most games released according to SteamDB, right? Most games that use that engine according to SteamDB. You may have just heard my headphones squeak. I wonder if that came through. All right, so let's look at Gamemaker really quickly. I tried Gamemaker recently, and I found it very inspiring and motivating, because I was able to jump into it and just immediately make something. I was just like, it was such a quick onboarding process. I was able to dive in so quickly, and I really enjoyed that. And this is why it is very much still a contender for me, and an engine that I want to keep playing around with. Although Godot is also a very strong contender at this moment. So let's list a few games that were made using Gamemaker, and I think it will surprise you how many there are. There are so many titles that were made with Gamemaker that are like pretty successful indie titles that I did not know. Like, I just never realized how many games are made with this engine. Undertale, Stone Shard, Forager, Hyperlight Drifter, Valhalla, Cyberpunk Bartender Action. I never know how to say that one out loud. Katana Zero, Zero Sievert, Awesome Knots, Hero Siege, Loop Hero, World of Horror, Rivals of Aether, Nuclear Throne, Hero's Hour, Risk of Rain, Momodora, Hotline Miami, Franbo, Pizza Tower, Chronicon. There are so many, like, Webbed. That's a more recent one. That's a great game. I've seen it played. I haven't played it. Red Strings Club. There's so many good games that are in this engine, and I don't know why it's talked about so little. It's interesting. It's like, as soon as I dug into this, I was like, what's going on here? Why aren't people recommending this engine all the time? Like, why are there so many people making games in this engine and not talking about it? And I think part of it is this engine has been around for a very long time. So some of these are older games or from people who have been making games in that engine for a long time and have a lot of experience with the engine. Like, maybe that's part of what's going on here. But it was surprising to me. I was like, how have I not ever run into strong recommendations for this before? Right? And it just goes to show that it's worth like exploring and looking around and going, okay, what was this made in? Like, when you find a game you really love, fighting off a cough again. When you find a game you really love, it might be worth peeking at the engine and just seeing, is this an engine I've heard of? Right? Because like, I didn't recognize this for so long. And there's just, Cook Serve Delicious 2. Cook Serve Delicious, one of my favorite series, made in Gamemaker. So this is a very real contender for engine that I might use. Excuse me. I'm having a little bit of a struggle today. And the biggest thing with this one that kicked it off for me was it felt good. Like, I was using it and I was like, this feels, I don't know, it feels easy and comfortable and smooth, and like, it felt like it made making a game easy, which immediately made me suspicious and then made me go try Godot. I was like, this feels too easy. Something's wrong. This is it's gonna take like a year into the project. There's gonna be something that bites me in the butt, right? Like, there's gonna be something about this that's really difficult later on and really frustrating, and it's just like hidden away. But I don't know. It might, I might just be being a bit overly concerned on that front, because it seems pretty good, pretty smooth. I just need to try it out more. It has kind of a weird workflow, and I like it. Now, the limitation that I need to mention right now, for anybody who's like, oh, this does sound kind of nice, you don't do 3D. It's from everything that I'm seeing, it is a 2D engine, which can sort of technically do 3D, maybe, right? Like, everything I'm understanding here is like, it's a 2D engine. You should use it for 2D games. If you're doing something 3D, just use a different engine. That's what I've heard. I can't say that that's 100% true. From what I understand, it is technically possible to make something 3D in this engine, but it seems like you're signing up for a lot of pain in that. That's a bit like the chopping down a tree with a samurai sword situation. It's like, get an axe, use an axe, right? All right, that's everything I've got to say about Gamemaker. Let's go to Godot. Now, the list of highly successful Godot games is very interesting to me. This is, I'm fascinated by this. All the other lists that I've read off to you, the years of release are all over the place, right? Like, it's all over the place. Godot, all of the successful games from Godot were released last year or this year. They were all 2022 or 2023, like all the really top ones. And there is like some, as soon as you get a little further down the list, it goes down to like 2021, 2020. There's a 2012 one, but they're like games I've never heard of. Top of the list for games released with Godot: Dome Keeper, Brotato, Cassette Beasts, Halls of Torment. And then from then it goes to stuff that I'm like, what? What's that game? I don't know what that is. And I'm sorting this by followers, by the way. So it's just, there are like 4 releases that are relatively recognizable for Godot. And everybody's always talking about how amazing Godot is. Everybody's like, this is the greatest engine. This engine's so good. And I'm like, is it just because it's young? Are there just not that many releases yet? And that's why we're not seeing like, it's so interesting to me that I look at this list and the top ones they were all just released. I'm like, well, this just seems like people have only just gotten to the point where they're releasing their successful titles with this engine, right? Like, it seems like they were learning, and now we're getting to the point where successful stuff is coming out, or it's gotten enough attention to pull people. So that interests me, because for a little while I was looking at it and I was like, well, so much successful stuff has come out on Gamemaker. I should just use Gamemaker. And then I looked at this and I was like, oh, but these are all recent. That's really interesting. This is a great example of me overanalyzing stuff and doing too much like research. And like ultimately what matters is try the engines, see how they feel. Which one are you willing to keep using? Oh, you're willing to keep using that one. Okay, use it. Great. Perfect. Right? Like, it doesn't really matter outside of that. But my brain keeps going, yeah, but maybe it matters a lot. Maybe you need to pay super close attention to this. But like, for me specifically, the most important factor is whether or not I'm going to continue working on the project. So are these engines that I can work with that I enjoy? So let's talk about my experience with Godot. I enjoy it. I like it has this cool structure for like events where like it just has this nice separate menu for kind of the I guess the word would be the signals that things send whenever they do an action. I'm very new to Godot. If it's not showing right now, there's going to be a weird cut there. I just coughed. I'm very new to Godot, but I want to explore it some more, and I want to see how I feel about it. And then I want to explore Gamemaker a little more and see how I feel about that, because if they're equal to me, then I'm just going to do Godot because it's free and it's open source. And I like that. And I don't really like Gamemaker's all tied in with like Opera GX and stuff. And I'm like, whatever. I don't have a horse in that race or whatever, but I'm not particularly interested in the Opera GX stuff and the privately owned companies and all this. Like, I'd rather use an open source software if all things are even. But that's just if they're even. Like, if I feel equal about the two of them, then I'll just go with Godot. But if Gamemaker is clearly like way better for my purposes and I just like love it, then I'll just go with Gamemaker. Cool. Godot can do 2D and 3D. My understanding is that it is mostly 2D. All these top games I'm seeing on this list, I believe, are 2D games, and it's everything I see about it is leaning towards 2D, but it's also 3D capable. It's getting a lot of funding ever since the Unity fiasco. That was like the best PR that Godot has ever had, as far as I can tell. I saw some chart where it like doubled their funding or something. It's ridiculous. So yeah, it's interesting. It's worth looking into, and I'm going to keep trying it out because why not, right? So my thought here is I'm going to keep testing out Godot and Gamemaker, mostly Godot at the moment. I'm having a slight lean towards it. I don't know if that shows. I mean, I'm sure the way I talked about Gamemaker is like, oh, wow, that's a really exciting engine. And it is, but there's something about it that's not quite landing for me. And I might just end up listening to that instinct and going, okay, fine, whatever, I'll just do Godot then. So I'll look into that a little more. And now that I've talked about all these engines, you can see maybe where all the overanalysis comes in. I look at all these factors, right? It just makes sense. It just makes sense to overanalyze this stuff, right? Like, you're like, oh, well, there's all these different factors, and look, this one has had more success than this. This is leaning towards this. What if you want to do this? Unreal Engine, what if you want to get a job in industry? That's the main reason I looked into Unreal, is because I wanted to build industry skills. But if I'm not actually using the engine, then I'm not building those skills. So it's not actually that valuable to me until I get to a point where I am actually using the engine. So for now, I'm just going to focus on picking an engine that I enjoy using. And it looks like the race is between Godot and Gamemaker. So I'm going to take my own advice, and I am going to explore them both, test them both, play with them both, and then I'll be able to make a decision. I don't have to make a decision right now. I can try them out for a week or two. And yeah, that's kind of where it ends up landing, right? All right, that's me talking through engine stuff. Next week's episode will be more game specific, I'm thinking. And then for the new year, so my next episode falls on Christmas, I think. And then the next episode after that falls on New Year's Day. I have an idea for my New Year's Day episode. I have kind of a concept that's been floating in my head. It may not be game specific, but I think it'll be interesting. I don't know. I might end up just doing one about some specific game, but anyway, let's go ahead and wrap things up for this week. All right, let's go through a couple questions for this week, and I've added a little challenge for myself this week as well. So 2 questions this time. What type of games do you enjoy? So I like 2D games, man. I like RPGs. I mean, I like some 3D stuff too. I like RPGs. I like story stuff. Yeah. That's kind of where I'm at. And then next question is, what type of game do you enjoy making? That's more interesting. I haven't tried making enough things to really know that. I think I need to make more stuff and find out. I've been enjoying making simple things like platformers. I don't actually enjoy playing platformers as much as I like making them, or at least making the one I made, right? I want to make like a little, like kind of like a bullet hell style thing. Those are fun. I like simple things without too many menus, without too much, what's the word for it? Without too much like statistical stuff. I like skill-based things, like things with just a little bit of like action skill-based stuff. And I like writing fiction, so maybe I want to incorporate that too. I just like making things, and I just want to keep exploring it. I think that's my answer. What's yours? And we've got the tip and the challenge for this week. The tip is, if you're stuck, like I was with Unreal Engine, try something else out. I was like, you know what, I'm feeling really stuck. I'm just going to try Gamemaker. And I was like, ooh, this feels good, right? If you're stuck, try something else. You don't have to commit to something else. Just try it. See how it goes. And then the challenge for myself is to go through the Godot 2D first game walkthrough. It's not like a giant challenge, but I just want to throw it out there for accountability. I plan on getting that done this week. We'll see how we do. I already did some of their, excuse me. I already did some of their like getting started stuff. So let's go ahead and finish up the 2D first game walkthrough. And then I need to come up with a challenge for the RPG Maker stuff too, because I need to give it a fair shake. It seems like a pretty good engine. So I'll give that a fair shake too somehow. Maybe not this week, maybe next week. For now, I'm going to focus on getting that Godot first game walkthrough done. Probably won't even take me a whole week. Probably take me a day or two. All right. That's everything this week. I'm tired out. I'm going to be honest. It's the holiday season, man. It's a lot. It's a lot. I hope you're doing well, though. I will talk to you all next week, or whenever you listen to that episode. It's going to be coming out Christmas Day, so like, I'm not expecting everybody to sit down around the fire and get a nice hot cocoa and listen to some game develop repeat on Christmas Day. But I mean, if you do, more power to you. But it'll be there for you whenever you're ready for it. That is everything I've got for you this week. Have a good week. Happy holidays. Have a good time. Make some stuff or take a break. You deserve a break, right? But maybe make some stuff, play around with engines, whatever. And I will see you in the next one. Have a good one. Bye-bye.